Did you know that the episode you are about to listen to is available on YouTube as a full multi-camera experience? Search for the Murder Police podcast channel on YouTube. Subscribe and see what you have been missing.
Oh, and you already said in your previous statement you were with her all day long, so you were in Lexington. He's like, yeah, but no, I certainly didn't do this. And then I give him a little more, and eventually he comes as clean as he possibly can. It's like, yeah, I was there. I was going to go work on a blazer that he had in his driveway, and Rachel went in, and she comes running out 15 minutes later. It's like, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here.
The same story he told.
Yes.
Or she told, rather.
Yes.
Warning. The podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Murder Police podcast, The Murder of Charlie Sowers, Part 2.
Read through it a couple of times, and Dave did great work. You know, sometimes so at that point, it had been 10 years. So I'm like, let's start re-interviewing some of the people that Dave interviewed, because it's been 10 years and we believed suspect, knew victim and all this stuff, and several friends. So maybe somebody broke up with their girlfriend and now they're ready to talk, stuff like that. So just really wound up re-interviewing people. And one interview with Tanya Joyner, I talked to her and she's like, yeah, talked to Tony McQueen, and she said that she was with Rachel Martin and Edward Carroll. Those are the suspects. Went down to Jigwater Creek and saw them burn some things right after Charlie was killed. And I'm like, well, I read Dave's memo, and he interviewed Tony McQueen. She didn't say that. So I tracked down Tony McQueen, and she's like, well, you heard it half right. My son did, and he told me that story. And I was like, okay, I'd like to speak to Nicholas, and he had passed away.
Her son passed away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as Dave knows, that statement is useless because it's hearsay.
Right.
So, again, there's sometimes bad guys get great breaks, you know, by evidence, you know,
People passing away.
People passing away. Yeah. We had that happen, I think, 3 times in this case, because it had been 10 years and some of the people were older, had passed away that would have been fantastic witnesses. So I talked to Tony. She leads me to another person, which leads me to another person. And Dave had done good work. He interviewed Edward and Rachel probably within 3 days of the murder and got their baseline statement. And again, family members were a little upset that Dave and Chris didn't push on the suspects, but they have to understand, it's like, if you don't have anything,
There's only so much you can
there's
do.
only so much, because you want to be on their good side so you can go back and talk to them. If you piss them off in the first interview, they'll ask for a lawyer and you can't talk to them again.
Another myth.
Yes.
There's the mythology that's out there again, is that, and we've talked about this on another show we did, is that you can just go pick people up and make them talk to you. Well, maybe in Russia or China.
Yeah.
But not in the United States of America. And then so beyond the Constitution, that pesky thing, I'm joking about that because we all benefit from that.
Yes.
Is no, you cannot compel people to go with you and talk. And then second to that is the relationship and rapport.
Yeah.
Is that you don't burn bridges.
Right. Because at that point, again, you hear enough, if enough callers come in from different sources saying the same thing, you're like, okay, we may have something here. Right. So Dave and Chris did the smart thing. They knocked on their door, didn't call them down to the police department, went to their house like, hey, we know you knew Charlie or whatever. Do you mind answering some questions for us? Keeping it very non-confrontational. And all they did was attempt to get that baseline. It's like, okay, where were you that day? Well, they said that they stayed in Nicholasville all day long. And then they hung out with some friends and they were very appreciative. Well, thank you so much. You know, we'll be in touch. Is it all right if we contact you if we have some more questions? So I'm like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. Thinking, phew, we're off their radar.
Yep.
And then at that point, I believe Dave did a search warrant for Rachel Martin's phone. And it, of course, contradicted their story. They were in Lexington and hit off the cell tower closest to Charlie's in Lexington. Not a real close proximity because the tower can only get you, such a radius. But they put him in the area, or put both of them in the area. And so Dave and Chris felt pretty confident, that it was more than likely them, and kept trying to interview people, but they were getting shut down. And again, the family was like, well, you caught them in a lie. They did it. It's like, I get what you're saying, but all that we can prove is their telephone, not even them. We could come back to them and say, well, somebody stole our phone that day.
Right.
All we can say is Rachel's phone was near a cell tower near Charlie's house. People intimate with the case recognize, no, Edward and Rachel probably. It's like, well, they did it. And this is another thing. There's such a difference between knowing something and proving it beyond a reasonable doubt.
Huge.
And you only get one crack at it. So you do have to be cautious. So Dave and Chris did the right thing. And for the family, they were kind of upset with Dave and Chris. But here's what I did in 2020. This is what Dave and Chris did in 2009. They did a lot more work than I did.
Right.
I came in at the last and just kind of turned over a couple of rocks that people felt more comfortable talking to me 10 years later than they did a week after Charlie's death. And then we're living in the same town with the suspects.
That's a real thing too.
Absolutely.
Is that people don't always materially lie to you on purpose. Sometimes they forget. Sometimes something that just sounds really simple to them, they won't bring up because they're like, what's that? They won't even faze them.
Mm-hmm.
And then go to that next one is that, they know people.
Yeah.
And like you said, they live in that town.
Yeah.
And that'll shut somebody down pretty quick too.
Yeah. So I wound up getting a couple people to give me just a little bit more information than they were able to give Dave and Chris initially. And then I was able to convince a couple of witnesses that I won't name to wear a wire. So they did that. We got some good admissions, but no real confessions about suspect told me he did this. But they did confirm some things about Edward and Rachel coming back to a house, borrowing a gas can, and they went off. And it's like, I'd heard they went to Jigwater Creek.
Where do you know where that?
It's in Nicholasville, Jessamine County, on the south end. It's not too far from here.
Yeah, we're gonna have to find Jigwater Creek because I had a case one time.
Never heard of that.
I had a case one time where some guns were thrown in the Kentucky River in Nonsuch, Kentucky.
Yeah, Nonsuch, in Woodford County.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's actually a place called Nonsuch.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. Well, sorry to jump, but we're going to find Jigwater Creek.
Yeah, so with all that, we were really close. I talked to the Commonwealth, which is always a good idea for young detectives out there, because our burden of proof is probable cause, which is roughly 51%. But you hand the Commonwealth a case of 51%, you're more than likely going to lose because they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And I had to sit down with the Commonwealth and went over my next options and, again, reviewed all the cell tower information, see if there was anything new we could glean from that. There wasn't.
And you hadn't spoken to these two people yet?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, the suspects are the last people you want to confront. Track down some more people where this individual had a conversation with the suspect, Edward Carroll. It's like, I'm going to rob Charlie. I'm going to take his wad of cash. Well, that person died. And again, I heard from a third party, from somebody that was at the house when this conversation took place, but didn't overhear it. It's like, oh no, Edward was talking to them, and I think I hear something about a burglary or a robbery, but I can't say specifically. And it's like, thanks for all your help.
Yeah. Exactly.
And again, it's just so frustrating sometimes because it's like, all you need is one true statement. And there was an individual that Dave showed a six-pack to, and for everybody out there, that's a photo lineup, 6 pictures, one of them being your suspect. And they identified Rachel Martin as being up at the bar restaurant a little bit before Charlie left and never came back. Well, that witness died. So we were hitting roadblock after roadblock. And what really broke it is at this time I had kind of befriended Edward Carroll's mother and talked to her. And I was like, hey, I just want to give you an opportunity because this train's coming down the tracks. I was bluffing. And I talked to her a couple of times. She was like, no, I remember this. Kind of built up a rapport with her. And then the last time I interviewed her, because she was present, I believe, when Dave and Chris interviewed them the first time. She was upstairs. And she told me, she's like, I just remembered that when Edward went in to take a shower after the detectives left, she told me, I killed Charlie. I'm like, you just remembered this?
10 years, more than 10 years later,
Yeah.
that kind of utterance?
Yeah.
It's not that I broke a glass on a china cabinet.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I forgot about. So this is the mother of Rachel,
The mother of Edward.
of Edward. So how about old was Edward and Rachel in 2009 when this happened?
Late 20s, early 30s, I believe.
So mom was probably,
60.
yeah.
Yeah.
So now mom's in her 70s,
Yeah.
and she just happened to remember that her son did this.
I didn't believe her, obviously. I think she knew that I was getting close, and she was trying to divert the blame on Rachel and protect her son.
That works.
Yeah.
Good.
So with that, I go to the Commonwealth, and it's like, I think we're at the point, I can't imagine me getting any more information. You know, I've talked to everybody I possibly can, and it's like, I'm going to go for Rachel, since something has already been said about her being responsible.
Were you afraid that mom was going to call Edward and say, this guy just left here? You better go hide, or you better get it together.
Sure. You know, that was a possibility, but I had to play my hand. You know, we were at the point of, you know, jumping off the cliff or walking away.
There we go.
So I tracked down Rachel, took another detective with me, Blake Woodward, really, really sharp young officer, very sharp. He'll be promoting, so Homicide will lose another good one, but good for him. We tracked her down at her family's farm in Garrett County, and we went up to her on her porch, and, you know, it's like, hey, we just need to talk to you again about, you know, Charlie Sowers. And she gave the verbatim statement that they gave Dave and Chris. And I was like, well, there's a problem with that. And I think I'd prepped it before. It's like, so you had your cell phone with you that day, you were making calls. So she couldn't say, somebody stole my cell phone.
Yes.
So I was like, well, we did the phone record search on your cell phone, and it shows you at, you know, Charlie's house. You know, and that was a bit of a bluff as well. You know, it did hit on the closest tower, but I said, you know, at his house. And she was like, well, yeah, I think we went up there because Edward was going to work on Charlie's car. We probably should have told you that, but we thought you'd think we were suspects, and we shouldn't have lied, but we did. Very smart, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
So then I was like, well, I've had somebody that I interviewed that said you admitted to killing Charlie Sowers on your own. And she's like, well, that's just, you can't do that. I didn't do that. At that point, I was like, you need to turn around, put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for the murder of Charlie Sowers. And it's like, this is your opportunity to tell the truth. And if anybody else was more culpable than you, then you need to tell that story. And that conversation lasted 15 minutes. She said, okay, I'll tell you this, and would give me increments of the truth.
Sure.
Until finally I was like, not good enough. And all her statements were factual that I could prove, because there are such things as false confessions.
Right.
You know, I wouldn't think it's like, yeah, that's when I saw Edward take the shotgun and shoot him in the head. Well, that's not true because of the evidence at the scene.
Now, were her and Edward dating back
They were.
then? And were they still affiliated 10 years later?
No, they lasted probably 6 months to a year. But again, both were afraid to, you know,
That the other
if I
probably
tell,
was going to tell.
Exactly. So eventually she wound up telling the story that they did go over there. The intent was for Edward to steal some money that Charlie had. It's like, I waited in the car, and all of a sudden Edward comes back out, and he's very flustered and said, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. And he still never told me what he did. And then, you know, the next thing we know, we go to this house and get some gas, and we go to Jigwater Creek, and I wait in the car, and he goes out, and I see smoke coming up from behind the brush, and he comes back with no shoes, you know, and I'm like, what's the deal? And so she finally confronts him. It's like, I didn't kill him. I hit him over the head just once. It was an accident. So it's like, okay, all right, that works. Whether he said that or not, it was inaccurate about the number of times that he struck Mr. Sowers. So with that, she's charged, and I believe we did a complicity to commit murder, which is easier to prove with multiple suspects, because that's what typically happens. Two people commit a crime. Eventually they will point the finger at each other. Mm-hmm. And complicity says you don't exactly have to know who actually killed the person, just that they were working in concert together. And it carries roughly the same penalty. So we charged them with that, got her down to the Pulaski County Jail, I think was the closest. had her housed. We tried to do a phone sting for Rachel to call Edward. He made some comments and then got panicked and hung up the phone because they hadn't talked in
years,
quite some time.
Why did she go to Pulaski instead of staying local?
They didn't have I didn't think they had any beds for her. So we had to find the next closest regional jail. And so that's where we took her. And again, the phone sting didn't really work out as we'd hoped. So again, talked with the Commonwealth. It's like, well, she pointed the finger at him, and I'm like, this is, it's shaky ground because if he doesn't confess, do we have enough? Just because she'd already allegedly confessed to Edward's mom, and then she's putting it on Edward. I mean,
And then those small little lies you talked about,
yeah,
that's really big fodder for a defense attorney.
It sure is.
I mean, her credibility is what a strange place to be. Was that statement recorded? Or do you remember?
Yes.
He might answer. Is it going? Okay. I hope he does answer. Right, son of a bitch. I had to get it on there first. It's ringing.
Hello?
Hey,
Hey,
what are you doing?
who's this?
Who do you think this is?
I don't know.
Dude. It's Rachel. What the fuck? I just got out this morning on house arrest.
House arrest?
Yeah. Yeah. For your bullshit. You know it's fucked up, man. You know it? This whole situation's fucked. We're fucked. This is fucked. You got me into all of this shit. I didn't even know him. Why would you do that? I mean, they said they come and talk. He just hung up on me.
Well, and he's probably thinking, I haven't talked to you in all these years. And number one, how odd that you call. And number two, why are you talking about this again?
Yeah.
Did he know she was incarcerated at that time?
No, we scripted it out, I believe, to where it's like, hey, the police came talking to me, we better get our story straight again, stuff like that. He started talking a little bit, I believe, and then finally just hung up on her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I go to the Commonwealth and like, okay, interview him, but if he doesn't put himself there, then we don't have enough. So I get with, he was living in Nicholasville at the time. I get with Nicholasville Police Department. It was actually a really good police department. There are so many detectives there over the years that were so helpful to us in cases. Autumn Howard was one, Detective Love. They really sharp people in that department.
It's a good PD.
It really is.
And he's back policing again now. Retired and went right back.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Good for him. Better man than I am.
Exactly. He's a good guy.
Yeah. But so I coordinate with them. They go pick him up, bring him to the jail. I introduce myself, ask him to, I was like, hey, we're here because of this. I need you to go through your story. He's like, I swear what I told them 10 years ago is the truth. And so I start to feed him a little, it's like, well, we know about the cell phone. No, I think that was lost or something. I was like, no, I already talked to Rachel. She had it all day and it was her phone. Oh, and you already said in your previous statement, you were with her all day long. So you were in Lexington. He's like, yeah, but no, I certainly didn't do this. And then I give him a little more, and eventually he comes as clean as he possibly can. It's like, yeah, I was there. I was going to go work on a blazer that he had in his driveway, and Rachel went in, and she comes running out 15 minutes later. It's like, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here.
The same story he told.
Yes.
Or she told, rather.
Yes. So, and he tells the same story about Jigwater Creek. They go to Jigwater Creek, but he stays in the car and she goes out and burns stuff. Yeah. So honestly, that was the best I was hoping for, because he's not just going to come out and say, no, it's been too long. I need to be honest. And it's like, I murdered him.
Yeah.
They just don't do that. Unless you've got overwhelming evidence that you can confront them with. So talked to Kim Henderson at the Commonwealth and told her that what he did. And she's like, he really said that?
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, I was expecting to get a call and said we're out of luck. But no, so she greenlighted the arrest. So charged him again with conspiracy to commit murder. Got it all wrapped up and was able to make it back to Andrea Williams' retirement party that afternoon.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So did you ever find the true story out of who did it?
No. Again, that's why we
Wow.
charged the complicity.
Yes.
Because, and this was an interesting case. It's when you have two people pointing the finger at each other, it's fantastic for police. It's like, oh, they both admitted being there. One of them did it. The other one watched it. It doesn't matter to me. But again, you try to prosecute this and you might have to separate trials. There's Bruden issues.
Bruden, exactly, which is a nightmare. Been there and done that.
You got to redact their statements anytime they mention such and such. So when the jury hears the audio, there's so many holes in it. I mean, they look at you, it's like, why didn't you ask this? It's like, well, I did, but we can't play it for you guys.
Well, and the inference will be because you're stupid.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
especially in today's climate.
Yeah.
Is that, well, that's simple, you know. So
Yeah.
Having had at least one, I've had more, but I had a big one time where that was the case, is that the hard thing for the jury too is that if they're linear thinkers, is they've got to know.
Yeah.
And mine was Lynetta White. And I remember talking to a reporter who covered the trial. And we were at a gym one day, and he said, if it was me, I would have had to known who had the hammer in their hand, because it was that. And Jonathan Goforth had thrown in the nefarious black guy that never was there. He threw another guy in the mix that never existed. But that's hard for a jury. It's hard when you're doing that, because when you're testifying, those are the nuances people will never understand, probably, when you have to redact it and act like that other person doesn't exist. And you'll look stupid in the end.
You really do.
Yeah.
Because like, you arrested on that statement. And it's like, well, you didn't hear 35% of it.
Yeah. That's why, a lot of people don't like plea bargains, but a lot of times you take the plea on who you feel is the less culpable. And that's tricky too.
Yep.
Because we've put people, all of us have put people in prison before that maybe didn't even pull the trigger, but you have to make a decision on fish or cut bait, because the power of that statement, even though they're going to attack it, might get over those humps with you.
Yeah.
What a difficult thing for a jury to put together.
It really is. And again, trying those are nightmares. And going into it when you make the arrest, it's like, I can imagine this thing 3 years down the road, the interview being cut to shreds, being redacted, and what are we going to be left with? And it was looking to be a nightmare, but
Hey, there's more to the story, so go download the next episode like the true crime fan that you are.
The Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims, so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, where you will find show notes, transcripts, information about our presenters, and a link to the official Murder Police Podcast merch store, where you can purchase a huge variety of Murder Police Podcast swag. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which is closed caption for those that are hearing impaired. Just search for the Murder Police Podcast and you will find us. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us 5 stars and a written review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. Make sure you set your player to automatically download new episodes so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.